Meat City, baby.
Hello and welcome back to Meat City Gaming. JD here with a new series covering a game that got a pretty bad rap, but I played through it recently and I enjoyed it. I thought it was much better than certainly was advertised and fit the niche of a game that I was looking for. So I'm going to do a video series detailing my new Game Plus playthrough of The Surge. This is, well, basically it's a Dark Souls clone. And let me get straight at the beginning here. It's not as good as Dark Souls, right? Clearly not. If there was another Dark Souls game out that I hadn't played yet, I would play it instead of this. But I've played all the Dark Souls games currently, and so I was looking for a fix that had a bit of a Dark Souls feel, and the Surge seemed to fit the bill. And it certainly has that difficult combat, exploration, winding maps that loop back on themselves, challenging boss fights, right? It has, you're carrying your currency with you, and if you die, you drop it and you have to retrieve it. It's got all those Dark Souls staples, but it's in a different package. It's in a, you're wearing a mech suit and combating other zombie-like mech suit characters and mechanical bosses. So it, has a different flavor than Dark Souls. It's got a crafting system. It's got some interesting tweaks on combat. So again, not as good as Dark Souls. It has its flaws. I think the biggest flaw that people knock on it is for the story, but we'll get into that in a little bit. What I want to do first, in this first episode, I'm going to walk through the first level of the game up to the first boss. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the game. I'm going to tell you why I think you should play it if it's the type of game that you would like to play. And then I'm going to go through mechanics of the game, how the combat works, some of the other features of the game, and I'll kind of talk through how that all fits together as we go through the first level of the game and work our way up to that first boss. When I get to the first boss, that'll be a second video. It'll be just the boss fight, and I will do a detailed walkthrough of how to take on the bosses and how to get the bonus weapons. Each of the bosses in the game, if you defeat them, you get their weapon. If you defeat them in a special way, you get the upgraded 2.0 version of their weapon. So each of those 5 bosses will have their own video dedicated to them in order as they come up, going into the strategy. The other videos in between, where I'm progressing through the levels, where I'm exploring, doing all that kind of stuff, won't have commentary. There's a lot of fighting, and it would be me kind of droning on looking for things to say. So rather than do that, I'm just going to put those in, and for the purpose of I hope this first video convinces you to play the game, right? I hope you see this, and if you're a Dark Souls fan, if you're this kind of challenging combat fan, you go play the Surge. And then if that interests you, hopefully the rest of the video will serve as a useful kind of guide on how to progress through the levels, how to beat the bosses. And this is probably like a 90% complete run. So this is my new Game Plus. I did a lot of the collectibles and all that stuff in my first playthrough. And then in this one, I tried to go to most of the areas, get most of the collectibles, but it's not 100% complete. If you follow this through, you'll be 90% of the way there. You can look up guides on the missing collectibles and some of those things. But otherwise, this would kind of get dragged on for a bit too long. So because this is New Game Plus, the combat's a bit more challenging. This is the first enemy of New Game Plus, and it's really difficult because this is one of the bonus characters in New Game Plus. So when you see characters that hit super hard, that are jumping around the screen, that seem to have some kind of super powered weapon, those are the special enemies that are added for the New Game Plus playthrough, and they're difficult. But they're not in the original regular first playthrough. Instead, you fight some, handicapped drone, and by handicapped I mean doesn't have a weapon, just has a little poking stick. So it's in tutorial level. You can kind of go through this part and work out the mechanic and block. But in New Game Plus, everything is way harder. You can block most attacks in regular game mode, and it's fine. You don't take damage. It only takes a little bit of your stamina. But here in New Game Plus, that doesn't work so well. Everything hits really hard, breaks through your block, and so you'll find me adjusting to that. I played through the first regular game, kind of figured out my combat style, and now I'm learning that it doesn't all work the same here in New Game Plus. Speaking of which, the weapon I'm using is another issue. The weapon I have now, these are the Claws of Gestalt. You get these for defeating the end boss in a certain way of the entire game, and they're generally considered the best weapon in the game. Their damage is insane. So I got those weapons at the end of the game, thought I'd throw them on and try them out in my New Game Plus playthrough. I quickly abandoned them because they just didn't have the cadence, they didn't have the feel of the weapon that I used primarily in my regular playthrough, and I got so used to the combos and the speed and how those attacks worked that coming into this new upped challenge environment and trying to learn the new weapon, even though it does more damage, I didn't have the flow, I didn't like the speed, they're a little bit slower, so I do end up abandoning these for my preferred weapon, which we'll get to in a little bit here. You're going to see me work through the first couple of enemies with these, but keep in mind, if you get to New Game Plus, most people will tell you these are the weapons you want, these are the most powerful weapon in the game, and you should probably use them. But for me, again, just based on my playstyle, I wasn't able to make them work. So speaking of the weapons, one of the cool concepts of this game are the different kinds of weapons, and they're grouped into categories. There's single-handed, which is like a long sword that you wield with one hand. There's single-rigged, which is more of a heavy weapon that's attached to your suit. There's dual-rigged, which is one on each arm of your suit that's attached to your suit. And then there's a staff weapon, which is self-explanatory. And then I think the last category is called heavy, which is just big, heavy, two-handed, blunt, usually, objects. So each of them has strengths and weaknesses. The big, heavy weapons are better at blocking. They do more damage, but they're much slower. The small weapons are faster. They have a quick punch. They help you flip around, make you more mobile. And that's the style of weapon I play with. By the way, the thing we just saw there was the Firebug. That's actually the second boss in the game. We kind of follow him along here, and his weapon is the weapon that I use in my first playthrough and what I switch to in this playthrough. When I take out that boss, his weapon, I think it's called the Firebug Throttle, and I did get the 2.0 version. That, for me, was the best feeling weapon of the game and the one that I had the most success with. So you'll see me switch back to that. It has rapid fire attacks. It can put fire on the ground, and the enemies that you face can catch fire, and the damage over time helps tick down. So I really enjoyed those, and certainly recommend getting them when you beat the second boss and trying them out, because for me, they made the combat the most fluid, the most comfortable. So early on here, this, again, the first stage is kind of a tutorial. You can lock on to enemies, and then you can target specific body parts. And so the body parts you can target are the head, torso, left arm, left leg, right leg. And each of the body parts can be armored or unarmored. And if you see a yellow indicator when you're targeting a body part, that means it's armored, and it'll take less damage. If you see a blue target, like here the head is yellow, it's an armored head, so it's going to take less damage. Blue, unarmored, will take more damage. If you don't target a body part, you'll deal neutral damage, which is gray, which is in the middle. The reason you want to target armored parts is that when you do enough damage, you'll eventually get a prompt on the screen to do an execution. This will, you have to hold the X button on the Xbox controller and stay within range to do it and not get hit while the meter winds up for like a half second. Doing an execution will kill the enemy and sever the body part that you have targeted if you've attacked it enough times, and then there's some random component. So if you target the head, attack it 5 times, switch to the leg, and try to do the finisher, it probably won't cut the leg off. It will still kill the enemy, but you won't get the leg severed, and severing the leg, for example, gives you the piece of armor that was worn there. If it's a head, you'll get the helmet. If it's an arm, you'll get the armor. If it's the weapon-holding arm, you can get the weapon drop. Now, it's not 100% guaranteed, but it happens most of the time. If you target the body part from the beginning, do a number of attacks to it, and then execute with the finisher on that same limb, normally it will drop. So you can see here I have the weapon arm targeted. Because these are weak enemies and my weapon is pretty strong, sometimes you don't build up enough damage to do the execution or enough energy to do the execution, but later on that's not a problem. Or when you're starting the game and your weapon is weak, that's not a problem. So you target the piece you want, do some damage, execute, and then you'll get the piece of armor that you want. And part of the achievements of the game are building the armor sets that you see. Putting a complete set of armor together will give you a bonus depending on what the armor set is. Some give you health upon a kill, some give you fast energy regeneration, and that's what the suit I'm wearing is a fast energy regeneration suit. It's a more advanced armor set. You get it from security personnel that are fairly difficult and fairly rare early on, but it's not boss armor. There are some more powerful, heavy pieces of armor out there, again, that you can pick to suit your playstyle. If you like to wade into damage with a big stick and tank damage and deal out punishing blows while they hit you for a little and you hit them for a lot, there's an armor set for that. You like to be mobile, flexible, run around, jump, conserve energy, there's an armor set for that too. So that's one of the cool things about this game. You know, in Dark Souls, a lot of the armor is very similar in terms of function, and aesthetically they are very cool. And of course, the aesthetics of Dark Souls are far and away above the ones I think that are on display in the Surge. But functionally, a lot of the armor is functionally the same in Dark Souls, and here you do get these extra bonuses and benefits. So another cool thing about this game. In order to get the armor pieces, you need to craft the armor. So you need scrap metal, which is like souls in Dark Souls. You get scrap metal for killing enemies. You can find it in consumables. If you get an armor piece and then you get it again, it will get turned into scrap and other materials back at your ops center. The ops center is basically the bonfire from the Souls games. These are spread out throughout the game. It's where you go to bank your tech scrap. It's where you go to upgrade, very similar to fireplaces, bonfires in Dark Souls. So you can see I just picked up an audio log, one of the collectibles in the game. They fill in a little bit of the story, and so, you know, as you watch for those, you'll get a little bit of background into the game. This that I just overloaded it's an end game item in New Game Plus. That will be there, but it'll have a really high number that your level of your suit, your level up, needs to reach in order to open those, and it's really high for when you're doing regular first playthrough. And the item in there is the highest upgrade item. They're called nano cores. And so when you're playing through regular on your first playthrough, every item, armor piece, weapon can go from Mark 1 to Mark 5. And you need to get same level loot to upgrade to the certain level. So if you want to upgrade a piece of armor to Mark 2, an arm piece, for example, you need other armor from Mark II enemies, and you'll be able to build the Mark II armor. When you get to Mark IV, what you need is nano cores to go to Mark V. And so nano cores are a rare resource. There's, I think, 5 or 8 of those boxes in the entire game. You need to collect those, and you'll be able to move up, I think it's 2 weapons and 1 full set of armor to Mark V. And you want to make sure you're doing that carefully, because it is an achievement to get 1 full set of armor to Mark V and 1 weapon to Mark V. So if you start with a weapon, don't waste it, because when you do New Game Plus, stuff can go up to Mark 10. So if you had everything at Mark 4 and don't complete that achievement on your regular playthrough, you basically need to start over, because you've got to go from 4 now to 10, not just 4 to 5. So keep that in mind as you're playing through the game. You'll see the nano core boxes. I think I hit all of them. I might miss one in this playthrough. Again, my level is high, and so I can grab most of them the first time through. You'll need to mark their location and then come back once you've leveled up appropriately. So again, in here, there was another one of those powerful New Game Plus enemies. Here he is again, and you really don't want to get involved with multiple enemies at the same time. Doing so, you can get pinned, you can lose energy. That's when trouble starts. One-on-one fights, you can learn the enemy's moves, you can count their attacks, and watch for openings. When you get 2 or 3 enemies at the same time, it's a cluster, and things are going to go poorly. And even these guys are super strong. One-on-one, really difficult. Again, this is only the second time I've seen one of these. The other was in the first enemy, and he didn't have as strong of a weapon as this guy does. So I have switched back now to my Firebug weapon. I'm much better at dealing with the enemy here. And one thing to watch for, if you're going for New Game Plus, when you get them low enough to do the execute, they'll start to heal themselves. He did a little like shake animation, and if you finish them off, great. If you don't, he heals to full, and then you got to start over on them again. I think they only have 1 heal though, so if you get them beaten back down again, you'll be able to finish them off the second time. So after defeating that enemy, We're working our way through here, and the name of the game, similar to Dark Souls, is progressing through an area, opening doors. If you come to a door from one side, it may be locked. When you work your way around through the level, it may open up. And seeing those overload symbols there, similar to the nanocore box, but these are on like a pipe, those are what open most of the locked doors. So you'll approach a door and it says it's locked. Odds are you'll work your way to the other side of the door, you'll find one of those overload switches, and then most of them are low level. If you've been progressing at all normally, you'll be able to open them without having to go grind specifically to do it. They're set pretty low. You overload the switch, the door opens, you go through it, and now you have a shortcut back to that area in case you die, and you want to get back to where you are quickly. So as you see, we come out here to the right. This is another of the locked doors, and if we go through there, this will bring us right back to the ops center that we started the game at. So it's just these two little droids here, and again, in regular first playthrough, these are pretty weak. And they're still fairly weak here in New Game Plus, but they're a little better. One thing to watch out for, side avenues, secrets, elevators that go up, hidden pathways through the bushes. They are scattered all over, and every time you find one of these paths, I promise there's going to be a reason it was there, whether it's a loot box with some scrap in it, or it's a collectible, or whatever. There's going to be something down those paths. So if you find an elevator that works, if you find a path to go down, explore it, and you will be rewarded with something at the end of that alley. So back in the Op Center here, you can see on the left is the amount of tech scrap that I'm carrying. On the right is the amount needed to level my character up to the next level. And these are all implants. It's a little more advanced. You unlock these later on in the game, but basically they're mods for your character. They give you extra health if you equip certain ones. They give you a heal. They give you extra scrap drops, so you can increase the amount of scrap that the enemies drop. A whole bunch of other things. Increase your energy level, increase your stamina. The trade-off is they require a number of gear level or core level to open the implant slot. And then you also need to have the proper amount of energy on your core to equip them. So you may open up 5 implant slots, but you may only be able to equip 3 because you don't have enough power to power all the implants. They each have a power requirement based on how powerful their ability is. I found a nice mix of going for big health, because especially in New Game Plus, you take damage and you don't want to get one shot. So big health, also for a high number of heals, and then you can mix in some other things depending what you're doing. If you're grinding, go for extra scrap drop. If you're going after a boss, go for extra energy, so you can do longer combos, or extra stamina. You can adjust them quickly. Some you can adjust in the field, some are hardwired, and those you can only adjust back at the Op Center. So experiment with them. You'll find a set that works for you. My recommendation, go big health, because that will help. This is what's called a smelter. There are 5 of them in the game. We'll find them all in this playthrough. There's kind of a weird spot where there's supposed to be 2, and only one shows up, and the other one isn't there. It happened for me in both runs, regular and New Game Plus. So maybe it's just an Xbox thing. I've seen a PC run where they are both there, but they don't seem to both spawn on the Xbox version. If you get, I'll kind of highlight it, or you'll see it when it gets there. There's just one of those golden coins on the ground, and that's where the second of 2 in a pack is supposed to be. Those coins, there's 5 of them total, 1 from each of the smelters, and they unlock a special armor suit at a special vending machine in the game. And again, that armor suit is tied to at least one achievement in the DLC, and it's pretty decent early on for use before you've gotten anything too far upgraded. So we're progressing through here. Again, we have the shortcut opened. We got rid of the smelter, and we're going to work our way towards the first boss. There's a couple more things we need to do here. Again, every corner has something to explore, some kind of loot drop or something, and so you want to check those out whenever you can, because all that stuff is valuable. I think by the end of my regular playthrough, I had enough loot, tech scrap consumables to level up 10 times if I wanted to. So there's a lot of stuff out there to pick up. So anyway, after you get to the top of the steps and take out that enemy and come down here, there's a couple of drones which you can take out without too much trouble. and then we're going to be very close to the first boss fight arena, but we're not quite ready to fight the boss yet. There's still one more side trip we need to make. So the drones, pretty easy. One of them has a charging attack with a poker, and the other has a pair of guns that it can shoot at you. Either way, they're pretty easy to avoid or block. You can dodge with the A button, or you can block and then do a counterattack and take them out without too much trouble. There is some loot up here and a hidden enemy, so keep an eye out. As soon as you get up into that little room, the guy behind the boxes pops out, and you do have a 2-on-1 fight, but they're regular enemies, so it's not too bad. And if you're quick enough, you might be able to take that first one down before the second one finds you. So this will be the first boss arena room. I'm going to show another shortcut, how to get back here, and then we'll complete the other little side task that we need to take care of. In terms of the combat, there is backstabbing in this. You can sneak up on enemies if you walk slowly. They can hear you, so noise is a factor. You just need to walk up out of sight, so behind the enemies, and slowly. And then if you do an attack at their back, there's a chance you'll knock them to the ground, and then your next regular attack while they're on the ground will deal, I think it's triple damage or something like that. In addition, the combat system has what they call horizontal strikes and vertical strikes. And most of the time, I didn't really see a difference, other than how you mix them forms your various combos, and so that's important for these claws. By the way, the way you activate the fire spin is I think light heavy, or heavy light, or vertical horizontal, I should say, and so it's important to understand those. But in terms of fighting an enemy, it doesn't really matter, except for a couple times, specifically at one or two of the bosses, which I'll highlight. Vertical strikes are more effective than horizontal for certainly for one of the bosses. Other than that, you want to time your hits. You'll kind of get the flow of them. The better your timing. If you just mash the left bumper over and over and over again, I think that's the horizontal attack, you will keep attacking. You will keep putting a chain together, but it's very inefficient in terms of your stamina, the green bar. If you time your hits carefully and flow and just hit the button when you want to flow into the next attack, it takes much less stamina, and you can do more powerful or longer chains with the same amount of stamina. So you'll learn those. Again, each one is different based on the weapon you're using, and each of the combos of the weapon is different. Just using the same button sequences will provide very different results based on what weapon you have equipped. Most of the same types of weapons have the same combos, but not always. There are some unique ones. For example, the claws of Gestalt are dual anchored, and even though the claws that I'm using are the firebugs are too, the dual rigged, I should say, the combos were different. So it's not always the same. So we made our way down into this dark area, and this is actually an opportunity for an achievement. Early on, the enemies that had the little electric kind of hammer or piston looking thing, it's on one arm and it's got an electric spark on the end of it. If you kill an enemy with that equipped in this dark area, you will get an achievement. So put that on early, come down the steps, kill the first enemy you see in the dark with it, and you'll get an achievement for yourself. So I did that on my first playthrough. Once you come down into this basement, clear out the guy in front here, and you see this overcharge panel. This is what activates the area, and it turns on security, and that activates also the train, which lets you get out of this first area. But doing so also activates the security protocols which control the first boss. So now the first boss is active in that boss arena. If you go in there, it will trigger the boss fight. So before we get to that, and there is one additional area down here that I didn't go to. It kind of loops around, and there's nothing too important. There's probably a collectible. There's definitely a message in a mail terminal that does that. So, feel free to find that on your playthrough. As you're working your way down there, there's a stairway around the back of one of the edges that you can take. But other than that, we pretty much covered this area. This is the last shortcut for the area. So come up the lift, or if you're coming back, you'll go down that lift and be right at the boss area. And you can see here the route that I'm going to take will go back to the ops center this actually brings us up behind on this elevated walkway here. So there's the fire spin. One of the reasons that I like the fire spin so much is you have to be patient with your attacks in this game. You can't just go ham and pound and pound and pound and pound on an enemy. You got to find an opportunity, get your damage in, back off, allow your stamina to recover, and wait for another opening. And if you can catch the enemy on fire with the fire spin while you're backing off, you still are logging some damage on the enemy. So one of the advantages to these claws. So when you walk your way down here, you activate this final shortcut. Look at that, right around the corner from the ops. You can go around the corner, go through the boxes, take that small lift up, and then walk across the catwalk to the left, and you'll be ready to go to the first boss fight. One note, there is an achievement, and it's one of the last achievements you'll probably get in the game if you're going for them. It's to kill a boss with their own weapon. So with the weapon they drop in the first playthrough, you have to use on them in the second. So that's what I'm doing here. These are, again, my preferred weapon, the Firebug Throttle, but I'm also equipping, I think it's called the Pax, maybe the Pax Imperator, and you have to use that weapon to kill the first boss. Or I could have used the Firebug Claws to kill the second boss. I wanted to try and knock it out in the first one for sure. So I'm going to upgrade that so it does a little more damage. I'm also upgrading my armor here. And you can see that in this first level, you'll get Mark 1 or Mark 6 if it's your New Game Plus armor pieces. And then say you get a new piece of armor. When you go to the upgrade slot, it's going to say upgrade to Mark 6. You may not have any of these pieces because they only drop in this first area. But you don't need to start with the Mark 6 upgrade. You can jump right to Mark 7. So if you've killed a bunch of Mark 2 or Mark 7 enemies, then when you go to upgrade, just hit right on the control pad, and it'll go upgrade to Mark 2 or Mark 7, and you can skip the first step. I didn't know that my first time, and I spent time coming back to this first area to grind for the Mark 1 loot drops so I could upgrade the new armor and weapons I was getting, and you don't need to do that. You can skip right over it. So, again, the plan is going to be to use my Firebug dual-rigged claws here to start the fight, to do damage, but I need to make sure I finish the fight with that Pax Imperator weapon. There you can see it. It's not one I'm familiar with, so we're going to hope things go okay here in the New Game Plus boss fight for the first boss. So, we are approaching the arena, and as I go in here, you do have to, because I went back and rested at the Op Center, the enemies do respawn. If you go back and don't rest, then the enemies won't respawn. You can walk in and return there, and if you don't use anything, the enemies will stay dead that you killed. Also note, not returning to the Op Center increases your multiplier. The more enemies you kill without going back, the higher tech scrap they drop. So, in the next video, if you guys are interested, I hope you'll come back and watch as we take on the first boss, the Pax Imperator. Thank you for joining me, and I'll see you next time.